In this screencast, we're going to take a look at the physiological data that was collected during a stimulus presentation and eye tracking experiment, and then also review the eye tracking visualization tools. So this is the data that was collected while a participant was watching the stim pres. And if we just familiarize ourselves with the data, the top channel is the ECG signal. So this was a lead 2 ECG. The next two channels show the gaze X and Y information. And then we've got a couple of channels that are calculated. This blue channel here, labeled CIDT, this is the fixation algorithm, and the one that was selected for this recording was dispersion. So this is giving us information about the fixations. And then the next channel is reporting the areas of interest, and these are scaled. So if I click on the top of this one green plateau here, I've got this set up so that it's showing me the value. This is 101, and that 101 relates to one of the areas of interest that were presented to the participant. And then down below, we've got heart rate and R2R interval calculated from the ECG channel at the top. Now, one of the important things about the eye tracking integration is the stimulus presentation integration is the ability for us to get this rich event mark information without having to put in a lot of extra equipment. So along the top in the global events bar, we have a whole series of different event marks. And I'm going to zoom in just over a region here so we can get a better look. I'm going to click on this one. This icon that's now red, that's the active event mark. This is a light bulb icon which represents stimulus delivery. So anytime an image or some form of stimulation is presented to the participant through the stimulus presentation system, this light bulb event mark will show up, and then it will have a label next to it. So in this case, this was the insect image, and I poorly labeled that. It's actually the lady eating the insect or about to take a bite out of the insect. And then to the right of that over here, we then have the area of interest information. So this is an area of interest hit, and you can see the label on there. The ID is 100 insect. I chose the friendly label insect, but the internal ID is 100, and that relates to this green channel down here. So that information comes across each time. Now we can go to the event palette. The event palette lists all the events that were presented or recorded during the acquisition. This is in chronological order, so this is time point 0. We always put an append mark right at the beginning, and then we can wander through the data and we can see the different points. So here, if I double click on this, it will take me to that event. So it's colored it red, and this is the fixation cross that was presented at this moment in time. Now we've advanced the data again. So this is when the image of the man holding the worm was presented. And you can use the left and right arrow keys here to advance through these, and you see the labels changing as I come through. And equally, if we compress all of that data down so we see everything on screen, we can see where we are in relation to the total recording. So that gives us some information about the event marks that are coming in, and we have some idea of the data or the signals that we're looking at. To get to the visualizations, go to the MP menu, and if you've got the eye tracking license, you'll see this sub-menu down here, Gaze. And what we're looking for is the visualization viewer. Perfect. So let's just get my monitor squared away. I'm doing this on a laptop, so usually it's really helpful if you've got two monitors, then you can expand these out and you get much nicer view. When you come into the visualization viewer, you've basically got a blank page to start with, and you need to tell the system what sort of displays you want to look at. Along the top, we've got a toolbar here. The first one that's going to allow you to see your data is the gaze path. So by selecting that option, I can see at this point in time the image that was being presented to the participant. But if I take my cursor, I can come all the way back over to the beginning, and it will advance the video or the view, the gaze path view, to that point. I can also adjust things over here. This is just almost like a little video player. So I'm going to start right at the beginning, hit the play button, and now you can see the gaze path showing up, the green line with the fixation points, the green dots. And on the left-hand side, we can see the cursor moving through the data, showing us what was happening in the physiological recording as the person was looking at that screen. Okay, so there are some tools here. If I come back over here, I'm just going to select an area of data. Using this option here, this allows me to make some setting adjustments. I can increase the tail. So here, I'm going to make this much longer. And I'm going to reduce the transparency so that it stays darker longer. And let's increase this a little bit. Okay, and now we come through. We have a better view, but you can see these are graduated. We can make these constant as well. Maybe we don't care so much about the graduation. And we can increase the size of those also. And now just get a slightly different view of the same data. And the degree of the length of your tail, okay, is going to control how much data you see on the screen. The longer you make this, the further back in time you get to see. And then you can do the same thing we did before, just play back from the beginning. Okay, so control exactly at what time you want to start looking at the data. So we'll just pick right from the beginning of this presentation. We'll move across and we'll look, okay, right about, back up a little bit. There we go. So now we're looking at the first 3 seconds. So you can see exactly what the person was looking at, the path they were taking just in that first 3 seconds. And then you can just play on from there. So you've got really good controls for doing that. Next up, we have the heat map. There's a couple of ways in which you can use the heat map. You can just click anywhere in the data, and the system by default will give you the heat map complete. But if you turn the animation on, the animated rendering, then it's going to behave a little bit like the gaze path. As you move across, you can see that heat map grow, and then you can adjust the number of fixations, you can adjust the intensity, so maybe you want to lower the intensity down a little bit, something like that, or maybe you want it to be much hotter than that. Okay, and the same for any of the images. So you certainly get a strong indication of where the person was looking with that. this is the luminance map. So very similar to the heat map. Well, I suppose it's the inverse of the heat map. We black out everything in the image and just illuminate the areas where the fixations occurred. So it's a little bit different. And again, you can control these. We can make these a little larger or smaller, dependent upon what you're trying to do. And you've got that same rendering, and you can increase or decrease the number of fixations to bring more or less data in. There's also a 3D map as well. So you can see the intensity here. You can move these around, control these, so you get a slightly different view. Get it to the position that you're more comfortable with. And you've got the same brightness controls here. We can, or the intensity, we can drop that down, or we can make that much greater. Okay, so that's the 3D. And then we've got some other views. So these get into the areas of interest. So again, let's come back over here. This one, we've got a little bit more going on. We've got more areas of interest. So on the right-hand side, we get the results. Down the bottom, we get the key. Everything's clearly labeled. Then when we mouse over one of these, so in this case, the insect, on the left-hand side, we get some additional values. We get the mean ECG R2R interval, which was 1.14 seconds, and then the mean heart rate, which is 52.7 beats per minute, while I was looking at that particular area of interest. So it just provides the mean heart rate for the time when I was looking at that particular area of interest over the entire presentation. So this image was presented for 7 seconds. We're going to calculate the mean heart rate just for the time periods when I was looking at that particular area. We've got this sigma option over here, which allows us to bring these measurements in. I'm just going to lower this down a little bit. A little bit more. There we go. So we get a nice view there. Right mouse click, and we get to copy this data to a clipboard. If we come back over here, we have the ability to add additional measurements. So if we've recorded other physiological signals, maybe we've recorded respiration rate, and we want to know what the mean respiration rate was, we can come over here, select the signal that we're interested in. So if it was respiration rate, we'd have another option down here. Select that option, and then we would have another row of measurements showing up over here. So moving on with the area of interest indicators, next one we have is called a scarf plot. And there's two ways of looking at this data. The default display just shows the area of interest. So this is time from 0 to 7 seconds. If I come in and I show the background information, still same time period, 7 seconds, but we can now see in relation to where I was looking at the areas of interest, you can see how much time I was spent outside of those. So for, say the majority of the time was actually spent over the areas of interest. Again, you can turn that on and off just by checking this box here. Finally, we have something that we call the string plot, and the string plot just gives us the pathway that I took in relation to the areas of interest that I hit as I was looking at the image. So ACBA is my path. We lay it out like a length of string, color it. So A is the insect, then C, the right eye, and then B, left eye, and then back to insect again. So it's just an indication of, if you're comparing participants, you can see very quickly if there's any commonality in the route that they took as they were looking, or the path they took as they were looking at the image. Okay, finally, we get a report. To access that, we select this option here, Create Area of Interest Statistics Report. Going to enable all three options. So we get the main summary, we get a dwell sequence analysis, and then also a fixation sequence analysis. And I'm just going to drop this into Excel as a temporary file. Takes a few seconds to run this report. There's a lot of calculations that are going on. Okay, so this is the final report that it's generating now, the fixation sequence. When that's done, it will open up an Excel worksheet for us with the results. All right, perfect. So we get some summary information, the time the file was created, other relevant information, and I'm going to just open this out a little bit, make it a little bit easier for us to view. Now this is in chronological order, the sequence that the images were presented to the participants. So the first one is the fixation cross. Then this is the insect, which was the image of the lady just about to eat the insect. And if we come down, we have information about the background, and then the dwell time, so the amount of time that was spent just looking at the background. So let's just focus on the insect for the moment. We get the internal ID, 100, the label that I assigned to that area of interest, which is the insect, dwell time, 3.2 seconds, the number of entries. So apparently I entered twice. The time of first entry, 144 milliseconds after the image was presented. The minimum dwell time was 896, the maximum approximately 2.3 seconds, the mean for the two, 1.6, the number of fixations over that area of interest, 9, time to first fixation, 1.4 seconds, total fixation time, 864, standard deviation, heart rate, mean heart rate while I was looking at that area of interest, 52.7, R-to-hour interval, 1.13, so on and so forth. So a lot of really good information there for each of the images. Obviously, the longer your presentation, the more the results you're going to get. This was a very short presentation. So then we've got our dwelling sequence. So this is the first one, is the cross. Then we're back to the insect again. So we see the path, A, B, A, C, A, D, A, B. And that's background is A, the insect, B, background A. We get the dwell time. Moving on to the cross, and then the worm. And then we get the fixation sequence. This time we get the fixation time, the coordinates for the X and the Y, and the fixation duration, the ID for the area of interest, and then the label, and the same for all of the images that were presented. Okay. We can close that out. So that provides a quick overview of the physiological data and the eye tracking views, the visualization options that we have for both the areas of interest and the gaze path information. All of it's tied together very nicely with AcqKnowledge, the linking between the playback viewer in the visualization really helps provide you with confidence in the information that you're looking at, and being able to pick those time periods out and know that you're extracting the right information from the correct spots really makes it very easy to use. So that concludes this tour of the AcqKnowledge eye tracking visualization system.